a little bit of a journey and some of the tips for, for selecting an ATS or a CRM or whatever you are looking for from a technology standpoint. So one of the things I'll just real quick, Nikhail talked a little bit about my background. One of the things, with ATAP, I'm on the board. I'm one of the catalysts and one of the people that helped launch this last year, the Global TA Day, which ended up being a lot of fun, and we're looking forward to this year as well. But after 17 years with PepsiCo in talent acquisition, I led the sourcing team there. Started my own company called Recruiting Advisors, and we're a strategic consulting firm. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cough, so bear with me here if I cough a little bit. So have a team that, feel free if you want to look at the website at any given time, but we help customers with ATS, CRM, technology, all sorts of things. So one of the reasons that asked to be able to speak today. Also a Grandmaster Sourcer with SourceCon. And a little known fact that not a lot of people know is that actually prior to joining PepsiCo, sorry about that. Prior to joining PepsiCo, I was actually in ATS sales for a company called Personic way back in the day. So have actually sold some of the systems that we'll be talking about. So I've actually experienced some of these things, not only from when I was at PepsiCo and we were going through the RFP process, in Recruiting Advisors when I've helped customers with evaluations and different things, and also from the ATS side. So from being a sales rep. So today what I want to take you through, and Aptitude Research published a research paper just recently and said that 44% of the companies that are out there have invested in new technology in 2020. And then 1 in 4 are looking to replace their ATS. So think about that. I mean, that's about 25% of those of the companies out there that potentially are considering replacing their ATS. So, it's one of those things, but, I know that over the years, I had always been a member of Career Crossroads. And one of the things that we'd always have at the meetings, and it was always fun, Jerry Crispin, you guys probably all know him, he would always say, what do you think about your ATS system? Is it a smile? Is it or is it a frown? You get to the point where people just always have a little bit of problem with their ATS, but I think it's one of those things that people just understand is out there. So one of the things that I want to talk to you guys about is, as you're evaluating your current technology, I always say, first off, before you just randomly go out and you decide, most people are just like, screw it, hate our ATS, we're just gonna get a new one. And the issue with that is, I'm reading the chat also. Rich mahogany background. Yes, it is. This is my real background. So, but thank you for the question. I'll try to respond to stuff as much as I can. So the thing is, I want to make sure that what you do when you're evaluating is really look at what your real problem is and what is the issue? Is it that, do you really need to replace your ATS? Or is it something with your other technology that you might be able to leverage or modify or improve that might take the place or might be able to help? Think about it, that, could you get something that would give you extra power? So the reason that I ask is that, sorry guys, the reason that I ask is that, and the reason I say that is that sometimes it's a 3, sometimes can take a 6-month evaluation and selection for a new ATS system, depending on how large your company is. Some global organizations, I've seen very long evaluation and selection processes. And then the other is that, depending on how large your organization is, I've seen 12 to 18 months to get a new ATS fully implemented. Usually they go in phases and stages, et cetera. But really, if you think about it, what is your real problem you're trying to solve? Is it truly within your ATS? Or is it that just your recruitment marketing team says, hey, we really don't have solid talent communities that we can communicate with, or we don't have the ability to do recruitment marketing campaigns, and they're wanting some sort of capabilities for, or your sourcing team doesn't have that capability. Well, think about that you might be able to bolt on to the front, like a CRM system that might be able to give you some of that technology and some of those features. So, just, the biggest thing is that if you're going to consider something on the front end, I always say, let's make sure though that you're going to buy the strongest CRM that would be out there if you're going to do it. So some of the other things that I want to talk to you about is that before you just go out and start looking for another ATS, I also want to have you think about some other stuff. Okay. Your current ATS, could it be that you just haven't had the right account manager? Could it be that that there are new versions that are out there that have been released, new products, new other things that your company just wasn't aware of, and that by flipping it on or changing something, you might be able to get some new modifications and new functionality. So what a lot of people do, and this is where I get tapped on the shoulder, to hire a consultant to come in, look at redesigning your system, look at revamping it. Maybe instead of going out, spending all the time, the money, everything that's involved with going out and getting a new system, could you just kind of what we call re-optimize your current situation, eliminate some unnecessary clicks, and look for ways to fix the problem without actually having to go and fully replace, because it's a lot of work. So the other is, and I'm doing all this, I'll get some of the, I'll get to, you're making the change, you're pulling off the Band-Aid, you're making the ATS change. We'll get to that in 1 or 2 slides. But the other thing you want to make sure of is that if before you make that change, see if there are like expansion of your ATS, like capabilities, like integrations you don't know about. So you've got the potential of some integrations that you could add in. Like if you have a CRM, could you integrate your ATS to your CRM? Could you take your back end HR, any of the HRIS systems and the HR backend technology? Could you do a better job with the integrations? The other is, a lot of people use the LinkedIn integration, but are you maximizing it? The other is kind of an AI resume matching or screening layer. Some companies that I've seen are tending to bolt on onto their ATS systems because they just don't have the capabilities innate within their ATS system. What they'll do is they'll bolt on a AI matching screening tool to help them with doing some of the resume matching and some of the other stuff. The last thing that I would say before you go out to the industry, go out to the world, look at other ATSs is, as I've talked about the CRM, but the one thing I am seeing is that there tends to be a little trend that people are going out and selecting the strongest CRM that they can and trying to have as much of the CRM work doing, if they have a really subpar ATS, that you can do a lot of the heavy lifting in the CRM. And then, at certain points where it's absolutely necessary, that's when you push the person into the ATS system. So the other thing is that I will tell you is that I'm seeing more and more the capability that some of the strongest CRMs out there, let's say that you have a subpar ATS, but you have one of the strongest global CRMs that are out there. Let's say that you own it. You just haven't optimized it, maximized it. Don't know. But one of the things I'm seeing is there is the concept that some of the CRMs are strong enough that while you're just doing your day-to-day, you're still using your ATS, imagine that what you could be doing is configuring in the back end whether it's in a sandbox, whether it's in a different instance, whatever, an ATS, which is the same vendor as your CRM potentially. So that way what you have is you could actually have your CRM and your ATS both from the same company, and you could just take your CRM and have that become your ATS. So just as I'm trying to have you guys think a little bit out of the box on some of this. Okay, question. I am gonna, Nikeo, I know I said I was gonna wait for the very end, but I see that if I change my ATS, who owns the existing data, me or the ATS vendor, and how do I get that data into the new system? So if it's okay, I'll answer that question very quickly. A very good question. I've seen it multiple ways. What a lot of companies will do is they want to take that old data and they will want to import it into their new instance. I don't always recommend that. What I've seen is a lot of times, this is with PepsiCo, we did this 3-4 times when we started our new ATS journey. What we would do is we would take our old ATS information and we would store it as a kind of a secondary backend. Almost not, we would leave the ATS out there, but it just wouldn't be live for anybody to see. And we would have that. But what we would do is we'd work with recruitment marketing to do a campaign, which basically says we are doing an upgrade of our applicant tracking system. And then what we want to do is invite you to come back and update your information in the system. What it does is it helps you get a lot of the it gets you fresh data. It has everything implemented or added to the system, but it really is up to you. You own the data from the ATS vendor. So, you pull it, but a lot of the sourcer in me says, never get rid of it because that's great data. You've got an email address, you got all this other stuff. But a lot of the times, depending on if you're a large global corporation and you get 100,000 resumes a year, you're like, I can't have all of that old stuff coming into my new system. So that's one thing that I see is that some people don't want to import all of that in. Typically what I see as kind of the rule of thumb is you take your open recs and when you're making the transition, you take your open recs and then you will add your open recs on a certain day. You'll put the new recs in your new system. And then try to get those people applying to the new recs in the new ATS. Hopefully that helps. Okay, so you guys have heard me talk about save your ATS, don't change. Don't do it if you don't need to. But if you're one of the people and you've said, enough's enough, we're changing, we're done. I think that here's some of the things that you will want to do when you're looking to make the change. So first, how do you find and how do you canvas the market? How do you learn everything that's out there? One of the things I say is always keep an eye on what are the best research lists and what are the things that are out there that say, this is the top, these are top systems. This is what they have. These are their capabilities. Excuse me. There was a new report. This one just came out probably, I don't know, no more than a month ago. And I was really impressed with this aptitude research. Really gives a good overview of a lot of the ATS vendors. Level sets, really talks about their capabilities. And if you're going to look at one kind of document, I might recommend this just because it's pretty good. The other is obviously at any given time, you just say to somebody, hey, I want to do a demonstration and start trying to get demos of different systems that you think might be good. If you haven't ever been to HR Tech, that's a great way of being able to see all of the ATS vendors really under one roof. If it's in person, if it's online, that's another great way. The other is networking. Talk to your friends, talk to people. The one thing is Facebook has a lot of great groups. There's some solid tips out there. And, the thing that I usually do is, and what I would recommend is I see too many people that go into a Facebook group and go, hey, we're looking for a new ATS. And what then happens is that the next 10 posts that come from that are ATS vendor salespeople trying to say that, you know, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. What I would tell you is I recommend to people that you go into that group, you'll see this little like magnifying glass, and do just a quick search on ATS or whatever vendor you're looking for, and kind of get the, you know, like do your research that way. Because the thing is that you're not putting it out there that you're looking for a new ATS and then you don't get pummeled by all sorts of people. If you want that, that's great. But I would just tell you that, you know, some of the people out there on Facebook in some of the groups might have, you know, some sort of relationship with the vendor to where they get kickbacks or something too, for if somebody gets selected and they say something about something or whatever. I don't have any of, you know, the relationships with any of the ATS vendors or anything like that. But, you know, it's one where when you see some of the people that are talking about some of the vendors, you're kind of like, okay, what's going on there? So here's the other thing that I would go through and I would tell you about. You're going to get to a spot where, okay, you're going through all these demos, you're starting to figure out what you want to do. Kind of the process that most companies use is the request for proposal. You do a formal RFP process. I'll take you through that. I've got some of the simple steps on the next slide. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that you and your team have gathered your solid requirements. What's your pain? What are your reasons for making the change? What are some of the things that you want to make sure in the next ATS that you're going to have? So verify your requirements. Your IT team may have a standard template that they use when they are trying to get new IT software technology. So it's always great to be able to grab something like that. Also, your HR operations team might have an RFP as well. So if you don't have somewhere to start, it's always good to look internal. But the biggest thing is make sure that you're getting, obviously, the vendor information company, the stability. But one thing that a lot of people don't always get, and they forget to ask, which is the percentage of money from profits go back into development. Because you want to make sure that the company is always keeping their eye on the technology and furthering what's happening. So really what you also want to know is, in today's world, kind of the three biggies are, do they have a CRM? Do they have an ATS? Do they have onboarding? And do they have internal mobility? Those are really the big four that most organizations are looking for right now when they're grabbing a vendor for implementing the technology. Boy, sorry about this cough, guys. The other is, I think everybody knows it's really important, and it's always been part of ATS systems to where, you know, 17 years at PepsiCo, I always made sure that I knew how to do diversity and inclusion and searching and everything else. But you also want to make sure that you have an understanding of what the company's position is on DEI and how they are working to also work with their product to make sure that it is going to be helping you in your search. The last is AI matching, finding out what they have on that front to be able to help you. So in terms of the, kind of a normal process that I see that when somebody uses a request for proposal process is that what they'll do a couple of like preliminary demos, like one or two people will do demos and be like, yeah, that looks good, that looks good, that one looks good. And they kind of start narrowing down. Obviously, there's probably, depending on if it's a large team, you get more people involved. But what I typically see is that you'll send the RFP document to the selected ATS vendors with a deadline for return. I've seen this everywhere from being a Excel document to a Word document to Google Doc to you name it. But it's one where, you know, you want to be able to give the heavy information from the vendor to be able to have. A lot of times they have this information because they get a lot of RFPs and they'll cut and paste stuff in. But you want to make sure that there's stuff in there that are specific to what you need as well. So what's going to happen? You're going to receive all those RFPs back. You're going to want to seek clarification. From there, you'll probably trim your list of the RFP responses, and then you'll get that list and have the ATS vendors, because you're probably now going to have your small, you know, not your I don't know if I'd say it's your finalist at that time, but you know, you're going to have your ATS vendors do kind of an overview of the company and a demo for about 2 hours. You know, always recommend you have to have specific score sheets and make people do them, immediately follow it, have them write down their thoughts, comments, everything else. Because I can tell you, having gone through this so many times, that you go from one to the next one to the next one. And if you don't take notes immediately following, it's like doing 15 interviews back to back to back to back. And you're kind of like, which candidate said which thing? You need to keep your notes. And so you almost have to be religious about spacing some time in between the vendors to make sure that you get that. The other is that once you have kind of taken those score sheets and you've picked kind of your top vendors, you're going to want to have them all. We kind of, even back in the day, we used to call it a bake-off, you know, where you get your finalists and then you get them all kind of almost together back to back to back. And you do kind of a competition between all of them to see, you know, who did the best. And, you know, with the top vendors, you want to do in-depth scenario-based demos. I'll go through some of that here in the next couple seconds. And then, but you want to make sure you have new versions of score sheets, you know, and then select your finalists. Now, one thing is that limit the number of slides that, you know, that a vendor can use, and make sure you give them scenarios. Now, why do you want to limit the number of slides? Well, because you want to see stuff live in the system. You don't want to have them talk about it. You want to hear them, you want to see it. Always remember this bullet, which is huge, big, 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 big. Always ask, what we are seeing, is this in beta or is this in production? Do you have customers that are currently on it? Do you have customers that are, you know, using this today? Because, you know, you just want to make sure that are they showing you things that are live and not, you know, you'll never see. So one of the things also up here that I would share with you as well is when in the scenarios, I tend to give all of the vendors something that is like a cybersecurity persona. Like Lisa Robinson is a cybersecurity professional. She is an employee referral, you know, or came in from a talent community or applied directly, and then talk about and show that journey from beginning to end. So now, big watchouts. This is where I see, so you've gone through this whole process. You've spent a ton of time. This is where I see what they call the wheels fall off of the whole process. This is where things get political. If leadership or finance has a relationship with a vendor, maybe it's not your ATS. Maybe it is your, I'll just say this, way back, like I'm going back to the 90s, late 90s, I'm showing my age here. But when I was selling ATS systems way back when, there was a company, PeopleSoft, that was the back end. So they had all the HR back end, HRIS back end data. And what they would do is they were trying to compete with the ATS vendors. And what they would do is they would give the ATS system, or they would put pressure on the finance team or the leadership team to use their products. The issue is that it seemed like a good deal for the organization, but sometimes they ended up in a worse position because the user adoption wasn't there. All the other things that they needed in the ATS weren't there. So you ended up getting, I'm not going to say an absolute subpar system, but let's face it, sometimes it absolutely was. You know, there are companies today in today's world. I was talking about what was going on back, you know, a while ago. But I do know of situations where companies have been very influenced by a specific vendor to take this ATS or to take that. Be very cautious of that and figure out a way that if something does come down the way of, how can you potentially combat that? I'm the next bullet with the information technology team. I am going to tell you, this is from personal, I experienced this at PepsiCo. We got down to our bake-off, our finalists, and we had 2 finalists. And what they were doing was, we had a first one, which was our selected, and then we had another one that was our backup. And what was happening was our IT team was working with both of them, and the runner-up just seemed like they wanted it more. So the IT team came back to us and overruled what our decision was on the one that we said was the one that we wanted, because they just said that from an IT perspective, they thought it would be wise to go with the other company because they seemed to want it more. I can't believe and begin to tell you that this kind of stuff happens, guys. So as much as you try to say, no, this is how it turned out, this is why. So the last thing I'll tell you guys about is with the finalists, sometimes you run into legal issues. Sometimes they run into red lines. Sometimes there's just stuff that when it comes to different things and it can create major delays, just watch out for that. Be aware that that could happen. The last thing that I'm going to share with you is, as you are preparing for the global project, one of the things that I would highly recommend that you do when you are looking at your ATS and your project as the ATS is brand the project. Every single time that I've been part of a implementation, a project, an ATS replacement, even optimizations, try to come up with a code name so that everybody understands what you're doing. And it's almost like the brand and the code name for the project. Reason is, you don't have to constantly say, this is for the system implementation on the re-implementation or the ATS. You just give it a name. So we've had, let me think, at PepsiCo, we came up with, I think it was H2O, which was hiring to onboard. But you know, that was just some things that you can come up with. And it just gives you all something to kind of have that brand that you talk about. Make sure that as you get to your project team, that you've got leadership from TA, your IT team, and operations. Do not forget operations, especially the TA coordinators. So important, because they want to make sure that, you know, when it comes to scheduling the interviews, you've got to make sure that. I just finished working with a large media brand company up in New York with an ATS, with one of the implementations, having to work through how to make sure that the interview process that they leverage would work in the ATS that they chose and would be accomplished. Make sure that you're picking subject matter experts. I think this is a no-brainer, but can speak for your user base. And don't always pick kind of your most tenured recruiters, because sometimes you want the more junior recruiters who may have a different approach or may have a different thought. Know that this is going to be, it can be a long project. You're going to have to understand your current state process. You're going to have to understand your future state process, where you are today, where you want to be. And one of the things, I'll put in a selfish plug here at the very end. is this is something that I see a lot of people do, which I think is wise. Also, it helps my company, but to hire a consultant to be in your corner that can help you as an advisor for your with best practices for either that piece of technology for that ATS vendor or just in general. But it also helps for you to you don't go through you don't go through an ATS implementation every day, but those of us that deal with them all the time, we're going through it so we know the things to look for. That way, you've got somebody kind of an armchair quarterback with you that can answer questions, and you're getting ready to go into a meeting with the vendor, and you can say, "This is the best practice that we know is out there," because don't always expect your ATS vendors to come to you with the best practices, the leading practices that are out there. They may just say, here's how you're going to want it configured, or this is our standard configuration. You tell us how you want it. So I want to make sure that you also understand that one as well. Okay, that is questions. Nikeo, I am looking at some here.
All right. It
Cool,
looks
man.
like we have a good amount of questions rolling in.
Good.
So we have a question asked originally, does the implementation time change if you are replacing an existing system?
I'm not absolutely positive what they mean. Is that if you are,
I think as opposed to implementing an ATS when you've never had one before, perhaps?
Yeah, it's it depends. The more complex that you try to make your next implementation because you've gone through it once can take a little bit more time, because the first time that you ever implemented it, when I see that companies do that, they don't do complex integrations with their back end or something like that. Then when they see, oh my gosh, we're going to upgrade to this next one that is really a good ATS system, that's when you see that people then tend to try to do more. And sometimes it can be phase one, phase two, phase three. So I've seen it go both ways. I've seen situations where I've seen it go super fast, like a 3 month. I've seen an ATS implementation. The fastest I think I've ever seen is a 3 month. The typical, or about a 6 month. 12 month is kind of what I prepare people for. But a 6 month is where someone says, we are ending our agreement with XYZ company. We need a replacement. This is the date that we need it by. And so you start down a path of trying to meet that. So not positive if we answered the question, but I think it just can vary.
Mm-hmm. That definitely makes sense. And we have another person asking, is it all right to ask during the RFP process what the vendor's strategy is? Are they interested in building their product and technology in order to be bought, and what the time frame is?
I get your point. Are they a startup? Are they a startup that is being built to be acquired by a bigger player? That's one of the things that I always ask about, and I always encourage people, excuse me, to ask about it in the RFP. Is company stability? How long have you been around? How many customers do you have? You want to know some of that stuff because you don't want to be left there kind of in a proverbial situation where, anytime any company gets bought, what typically happens is a lot of times companies will buy other companies in order to get their downstream client maintenance or their customer revenue. So they want the customers, and then they'll come in, and then they can either keep the new software, or they can implement or install new software for you. Not always the greatest. But I don't think it's bad to ask what your strategy is. There are companies out there which I'm a big fan of, that are private. They don't want to go public. They don't want to be controlled by stockholders, shareholders. They want to control and do what they want. They don't want anybody else telling them what to do. I think that's great. But to answer your question, I think that you always want to ask what their strategy is. You always want to ask, how many salespeople do you have? How many developers do you have? What's your balance of your team members? That also helps you understand where they are in their journey, because if they have 2 developers and 70 salespeople, come on. So that kind of tells you a different thing. So hopefully I answered the question, but that's an interesting piece. But just look at the number of customers and the size of the customers that they have. If you're a smaller company, yeah, maybe take a peek at one of the smaller companies. I would highly recommend that. And if you want to ever contact me afterwards, I think I've still got the slide up. I don't know if I do or not.
You do, yep.
Okay, yeah, feel free to contact me. Can point you in the direction of of some vendors or whatever. What else do we got?
We have another question from Jerry Crispin, who asks, do you want to talk to finalist clients? How to best get similar firms, size, industry in the mix rather than the ones the vendor wants to give you?
Ooh, the old, can you get references that are the references you want to talk to, not the ones they want you to talk to, right? I think that, the kind of my trick that I talked to you about on Facebook is where you do the search. I think is very telling. And there's a reason that I advised to do that, is you get to see people's reactions. Like they'll say, what does everybody think about this ATS? And then you'll see just like, we have it, we hate it. We had this, we hate it. Run. You see some of these responses, and you can go back and see who the people are. So that might be a way to do it. But this is Mr. Jerry Crispin, who I was talking about earlier. Didn't know he was on. So humbled that he's even asking questions here with us today. But yeah, that's the thing I would do is I would, the drill. I mean, just do some networking and find out what the scoop is. So you're gonna hear what they want you to hear, but then you can always ask the question in the meetings with the ones that they want you to talk to. Kind of the what's the one, oh, it's your question. What's the one thing that keeps you up at night? No. What's the, you can always ask them, like, what's one thing that you wish that this vendor could do better? And that's one thing that I've seen really becomes very, very telling, because they'll really start to talk to you a little bit about some of the things, and maybe just a little bit of a little bit of the stuff that wouldn't be the norm and what they would give in a reference. So
awesome. All right. Well, we have another question of, do you advocate for involving new hires that were recent users of the ATS front end to get their thoughts, or ATA front end to get their thoughts?
I will tell you that most companies do. They don't do it while evaluating various ATS systems, but so now hang on. You're actually. Let me look at the question one more time, because there's an interesting take that I could have here on this. Because what a lot of companies do, there's an organization, this Jerry Crispin guy also is a big part of what's called the Candidate Experience Awards. And what a lot of companies will do is they'll take their ATSs and they'll do their, they'll take surveys of the ATS people that have applied. What was the candidate experience, and then figure out how you need to improve. But what's interesting is your question made me think about new hires. Could you canvas them to tell you what they liked in the competition and the other systems at the competition. And I'm not sure if that's where you're going. And I think that's a brilliant idea. That it might be like, hey, when you were out there applying, what were some of the things that you saw that were interesting to you? Because us and, we so great talent acquisition people that think we know what the world needs. What you're saying is ask the new hires. They would probably know better than any about what matters to them. So I think it's a great idea. If that's not what you meant to say, just say it is, because it's a great idea. So
I think it is. They did mention the front end, so I think you're onto
yeah.
something there. That's a wonderful idea.
They're
Awesome.
anonymous. So
Yes. So we have another question here. Where do you fall on the all-in-one enterprise models, i.e. UKG, Workday, versus best of breed, getting best ATS, talent development, HR core, and integrate them?
there are companies that will say the all-in-one enterprise model is the way to go. Super simple. I would be careful. The biggest thing is that while it's good, sometimes there's a reason best of breed is what it is. Best of breed is you're getting the best of the strongest. I mean, it's like getting a dream team. You're getting the best of every piece. So while there are great things that you can do by having everything all in one system, if and when there is ever a time where you have a end-to-end all-in-one solution that has the CRM that is top tier, an ATS that's top tier, your onboarding and your internal mobility that is at the level of the top tier with all of the one enterprise modules, go with that. But what I have typically seen is that the all-in-one like enterprise model, their ATS may not be the world's greatest. So, or CRM doesn't exist, or if it's there, it's an afterthought, or it may not, may not be as strong as some of the others out there. So don't know if I've answered the question, but that's my personal opinion. I always try to go for the strongest solution that I can get.
Awesome. A couple more questions here, it looks like. So from your perspective, what's more important, nurture talent that is within the ATS or running the hiring process for candidates associated with the job?
So let me make sure I get this. So from your, what is most important? So nurture talent that's within the ATS, or running the hiring process for candidates associated with the job. I'm not positive that what is more important to me. Both parts. I mean, I'm sorry not to give you a specific answer. I'm a corporate recruiter by trade who was very good at sourcing and went to the sourcing side because could generate solid pipelines of talent and do the nurturing. I think that if you're going to survive and you're going to be a good recruiter, you can't just, the hiring process for the candidates associated with the job can be the equivalent of what we would say kind of I'm just going to say this word, could be the equivalent of kind of post and pray. I am more of a create your own luck, do some talent nurturing, push those candidates in. That's why I always talk about CRM, because you're always talent nurturing, you're creating those pipelines and you can push them into your job pool as well. But hell, if you're with a big company, I'll tell you at PepsiCo, people thought I was spoiled rotten because I would get 100 people to apply to the jobs that I was needing. And unfortunately, though, it's 100 people that aren't exactly what we're seeking. They think they're a spot on fit, but they aren't. So it's one of those where you have to kind of balance what you're doing.
Awesome. All right. Up for one last one. We have a question on, are pricing models for ATS or CRM generally based on the size of the company, number of employees, number of users, or other?
I've seen it. Being an ex ATS sales guy, um, I've seen it a couple different ways. It's depending on the model. Excuse me. Depending on the size of the organization, the larger um, the ATS or the larger the vendor, the more that I see it based on the it can be based on size of company, but um, some of the ATS deals that I have seen and helped kind of put together typically are also based on the number of users. So what a lot of companies will do is they'll do their price breaks are at number of users. So there's 1 to 10 users is this, 10 to 50 is this, 50 to 99 is this, 99 to over that is whatever. So a lot of times it's pricing based on that. The one thing that I would watch out that some of the customers just don't always do or think about is um, when it comes to hiring managers and the hiring manager portals and the interaction back with those hiring managers, if do they need to be a user of the system, or how does it work on that? So just depending on the pricing model and the way the company does it, just look at the hiring manager piece is one where I've seen some people go, well, that sucks. So I would just tell you that's one thing. You'll want to ask them, what their pricing model is if it's based on the company size. Some companies do that just based on they want to give you an enterprise license. Here you go. Here's your enterprise. Use it for however many users you want globally. Knock yourself out. Just because they can't go, user per user per user. So I know we
Awesome.
are probably over time. So
We are, yes. So that's it for now. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining with us here.
need me to stop
This
sharing? Got it.
No, no worries. I already popped it on there. So thanks so much, Jim, for presenting with us today. It was a
My
pleasure to
pleasure.
have you, and I think it was a great value add to people. Obviously, people were quite engaged with the questions, which is great to see. So, last point, everyone. You will get the recording of the presentation emailed to all of you shortly today. And as well, to learn more about ATAP, head to any of these links or methods of contacting us and finding out more about us. And with no further ado, I hope you all have a fantastic day. Thank you so much, everybody.